Hello everyone, welcome back to TASGiving. I am Drakodan, this is Astro Boy. Very cool GBA run. If you've played treasure games before like Gunstar Heroes, you know what to expect. If you don't quite know what to expect, I'll do my best to take you through this game. We're going to be going through the first leg of the game called Birth, which is the de facto any percent category of the game. So, if everyone is ready, I'm going to kick things off in 3, 2, 1, and go. So, Astro Boy Omega Factor, as I say, this is a treasure title. It's a side-scrolling 2D beat-em-up GBA title. It's really beautiful for a GBA title, in my opinion. Hopefully people are going to agree as they see this game. So, what you're seeing here, getting through waves of enemies, this is the bulk of the game, and this is what progression of this game is primarily based on. You want to clear enemy waves, and the game defines an enemy wave as being cleared as when the corpses of the enemies leave the screen. You can see that they bounce around after you defeat the enemies, and so this does cause a little bit of variance in how long it can take waves to clear, based on the trajectory of the enemy corpses. Now for RTA this is obviously a trifling matter, but this is a TAS marathon, so we pay attention to the little details, and I did recently, as in this year, finish a TAS of this run that I'm doing now, which was published to TAS Videos, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you all to everyone at TAS Videos for accepting this run. Bad RNG! This is why we do TASs and not RTA runs, because then you don't have to deal with getting bad RNG, where that car has a 50-50 chance to randomly go high or low, and if it goes low, that's just some automatic time loss. So if you are one of the few people who has actually watched the TAS of this already, you're going to get to see how badly everything can go when you don't get perfect RNG, when you can't predict every single outcome, when you can't tell where everything is going to spawn and where all the danger is going to be. This isn't a particularly volatile run, but it's the type of run where there's a million different tiny sources of time loss, and when you don't have control over random elements, they stack up very quickly. Such as wasting a second or so on not being able to optimally hit those beats there. So the ways that Astro can attack, we've already seen a few of Astro's different attack utilities. You have the basic punch and kick combo. You can use this jet to boost around, which also makes you intangible and allows you to go through things and not take damage. Very useful ability. You've also got the finger laser, which I've used a little bit, which is a screen-wide attack. And Astro also has a couple of super attacks, which you'll see more as we go further through the run. Come on, please. Alright, I'm going to go to the left to start this, and these spiders are now going to spawn on the left, top and right of the screen respectively in a fairly predictable pattern, but again their movements are random, so they can be a little uncooperative. Please? No. So the main way that my movement is going to be throttled in this game is that although I have the boost, I cannot use it indefinitely. This is a game where you've already seen me visit the stat point screen one time, and I boosted the laser stat. You gain upgrade points in this game from meeting characters and learning about their emotions and personalities. Like every time Astro learns more about people's emotions, you get some points to spend. The first half of the run has us boosting purely the laser stat, as it is the highest damage output ability for boss fights such as this. With 2 points in laser, each phase of this boss is just one punch followed by one arm cannon. This is the highest damage attack you can use in the game, used with the R button. The other super attack is the machine gun, which is on the L button. It's a screen-wide attack which does very little damage, but it also stuns everything on screen and clears projectiles off screen, so it's more of a utility attack that's used in emergency situations. But there's really not much in this game that is like super threatening in the sense of it'll kill you very quickly. So the machine gun does have its place, but not for quite a while in the run. The game is also divided into two main gameplay styles. You've got the side-scrolling beat-em-ups, which was in Stage 1, and then in Stage 2 we start with this auto-scroller segment. There's a few of these auto-scrollers, and they do follow the same rule as the beat-em-up sections, which is the next waves start when the previous waves end, when everything leaves the screen. So there are some random enemy placements in these auto-scroller sections, but there are also a lot of fixed enemy placements, so progressing these sections is just about getting enemies off screen as fast as possible, being in the right place to start each new enemy wave as they come on. You get a little mini-boss here, which I'm just going to decimate with 2 arm cannons as soon as I see the health meter come on screen. Now, you can see that every time I start a super attack, there is a startup animation that's about 2 seconds long, so even though the arm cannon is by far the highest DPS you can manage in the game, you don't necessarily want to use it for everything, because the startup time can outweigh the time benefit of using it. In most cases against like trash enemies, non-boss enemies, I don't actually use the arm cannon unless it is the fastest option due to being able to hit the entire width of the screen, for instance, if there's a wide number of enemies on screen. For boss fights though, it is simply the highest damage per second option you have available. Such as the artificial sun here, which you try to end the first phase with it as close to the center of the screen as possible so that it spends less time traveling, and now in the second phase it's going to gradually get larger as it takes more damage, but I'm going to just finish it off with the arm cannon. Well, I'm going to finish it off with the finger laser here. This is a good example of what I mean. It has little enough HP remaining here that it's faster to finish it off with a finger laser rather than spend the time to use another arm cannon. It just doesn't save time to use the arm cannon again there. Go straight into another mini boss fight here, which is going to be 3 punches followed by an arm cannon. Like, it chews through the HP super fast. Like, some bosses in this game are just weak like that, but the overall damage output of the arm cannon is very strong. And as you can see, I'm only putting more and more points into the laser stat, so it's only going to get stronger as the game progresses. Trying a little bit of snazzy movement there, but that's very difficult to fall down there perfectly without hitting the floor there. This room is pitch black, as you can see. This is because I don't have any points in the hyper sensor, the bottom stat, but this room is the same every time, and I just know the route, so there's really no need to have the hyper sensor there. There is one more room in the game which, quote-unquote, requires the hyper sensor in Stage 3, which is going to be a very foggy room, but again, it's not actually required to pass through the room, so as long as you know the route, it's very easy to pass through. So, a good example of the invincibility afforded by the jets there. Even though those enemies are supposed to drop on you and deal heavy damage and knockback, as long as you are boosting, you are completely invulnerable. Like, you can't be damaged by any source. The trade-off being that you can't damage anything whilst you are boosting yourself. So, get a hidden upgrade point in the background here. This is quite important to be on the upgrade route that I want to be, and to have the damage output that I want for specific fights. There's quite a lot of moments like this in the game where there's like a hidden upgrade point that you need to interact with the background in a specific location and in a specific way to trigger the upgrade point. So, some of them are missable, such as that one, since this is obviously in an auto-scroller section. It's not necessarily like a run killer or a reset if you miss that. Like, you can still easily finish the run. One of the nice things about this run is that it is not very punishing. It's like, even if you don't get every upgrade point, you can still more or less use the same strats, they just won't be as fast. So here's Stage 2 boss, Hook. He is a robot who goes through a few different animal forms. He always goes through the 4 forms that he has to start the fight. So you're always going to see him cycle through the 4 forms, and then after the 4th transformation, so after this next transformation here, it's going to randomly select forms to go to, and I just want to see the lion as little as possible. Because whenever the lion spawns, it has the green aura surrounding it, which wastes about a second, because you just can't attack through the green aura. Okay, so the last one. As you can see, I need to wait for that green aura to go away. But you can force it to go away pretty quickly by going behind, which forces him to turn around, so that does mitigate the time loss from getting lion form at all fairly nicely. So this point we actually put into shot. That's not mismenuing, you do put this point into shot. So again, in RTA play, one of the main differences to how this is performed in a task is obviously you do not have control over random elements. One of the most prevalent random elements in this game is enemy locations. You have some enemy waves where they will appear in fixed locations such as this, but then others where you can see now enemies are coming on the screen randomly. Or they're still in semi-fixed locations, but being able to consistently handle those, not very reasonable for RTA play, especially with this screen here. There's a long upward section here. I'm standing in the bottom here to allow these enemies to basically congregate in the same location, so that I can just try and hit them a little more consistently. I'm not doing a very good job of it though. Like I say, random enemy placements. I even use this strategy in the task of standing in the corner to cluster the enemies and make them a lot quicker to get. It looks a lot cleaner in the task though, where I get them all like very quickly. So I'm actually using the third super attack here, the EX dash. It's on A and B simultaneously. Simultaneously being literal, you need to do A and B on the same frame to use the EX dash. And it basically gives you an extra jump for if you need an extra jump because you don't have any points in the jet stack. So the TAS goes on the left side here, like uses the laser to the right, but when I was trying to do that in the TAS, I found that it is basically frame and pixel perfect to be able to get into that position, so I'm not going to attempt that in RTA play. I don't want to just lose time for no reason. And there's some easy positions we have to just be able to, you know, very consistently hit groups of enemies with the arm cannon. One more guy's going to come on top here, then boost downwards, repeat again. If this robot, okay, if that robot exits the screen very quickly, it is possible to unlock the screen early without getting the second grey enemy. The enemies are color-coded for like how strong they are. I used that arm cannon a little too early. Ideally, you want to be able to use it here so you can get top and bottom at the same time. So yeah, the enemies are color-coded, where purple is the strongest enemy class. Purple and red are the two strongest, and purple and red both suffer no stagger, like no knockback when you hit them, which makes them a little more difficult to play around. So here's the room I mentioned where this is the second room where you would normally need the sensor to be able to see where you're going, but as you can see here, it's still like, you know, it's fairly reasonable to see what you're doing in this room. Getting one more optional upgrade point here. And this optional upgrade point is very strange in that it results in some compound time save. What I mean by that is I'm going to get into this screen here. I'm going to try to get this enemy to play ball, but apparently not. Okay, so now that I'm on the screen, you can see I'm still getting a pretty nice stable frame rate. This is not really supposed to happen. If you just go into this area normally, this screen, once it gets locked here, it lags incredibly. Like, you lose every other frame to lag. But for whatever reason, if you get the upgrade point that I just got, the lag does not occur. I have no idea why that happens in the game, but it does, and I found that by accident whilst rooting 100%, since before that point I didn't get that upgrade point in any percent. And then I just found, oh, I need to get every upgrade point, so I'm going to get this one, and suddenly no lag in that room. And so getting the upgrade point itself can save some time from having better stats, but then the fact that it saves time additionally because it's making the game run faster, that's a really nice source of time save. I'm going to try a little thing here. So it's a nice little bit of tech that I used there where I used a boost to interrupt my punch combo so that I could start a new combo earlier. That's something that is used more widely in the TAS than it is in RTA play. So Atlas here is going to fire a big laser in our face, but we can just sit inside it. I don't exactly know how the game determines which attacks can specifically hit you at specific times, but whilst you're in the process of using a super attack, you have like some selective invincibility for certain types of attacks. You see there when you charged into me, that did hit me, but the huge laser that he fires just doesn't hit you. And the fight's over. Like I say, when you boost the laser stat early, you get an insane amount of firepower. Like, in a casual sense, this game is very much designed around experimenting with the different stats that you have and not necessarily cashing all your chips on the strongest DPS option. Plus, we're playing on the easiest difficulty because the game is not substantially different in the harder difficulties, aside from being much, much harder, to the point of being very difficult to, like, clear at all. I should root hard mode at some point, but God, is hard mode very difficult to execute. Like, it's one of the games where hard is very appropriately named. You die extremely quickly, the enemies are very tough, and you don't have many super attacks to use, and a lot of them are used for utility and survivability. So stuff takes a lot longer to kill in hard as well, just because you have nowhere near the same level of firepower. And a lot of bosses, like, kill you in 2 hits. And because you're worried about survivability, you're also putting more points into defensive stats like jets and life, so that cuts your firepower even further. So it's like, yeah, hard is very, very hard. So this screen here, new auto-scroller, as you can see there's these platforms coming left and right. They are random, of course. In the TAS, the way that I saved time in this screen was by manipulating it so that the first platforms that appear on the left firstly appeared as low as possible so they exited the screen sooner, and then I wanted as many platforms on the right hand side as possible because they exit the screen even faster than if they're on the left. Like, even if they're on the left and they're on the bottom, they exit the screen pretty quickly, but if they're on the right at all, they exit the screen even faster, and because of them exiting the right border of the screen, it's irrelevant how high they are on the screen because they're going to exit the right border before they exit the bottom border. So that made it a lot easier to work with RNG manipulation. Like, I could get, like, usable results that were just as fast with much less effort than if I'd needed them to be on the bottom specifically. Like, one of those nicely convenient cases where, like, trying to be completely optimal in a TAS doesn't necessarily involve a ton of hair pulling. It just naturally worked out as, oh, well, this is actually the fastest option and it's really easy to work with. So these enemies are fixed for the most part. Since there isn't really much to do in this section in a TAS environment, again, if you go and check out the TAS of this game, you'll see that in all of these auto-scroll sections, actually, I just bounce around the screen like a DVD logo. I really like that. You can play a fun game of keep an eye out throughout the entire run to see if Astro ever hits the very corner of the screen like you watch the DVD logo, and I know for a fact there is at least one point in the task where I do hit the cornermost pixel, so again, yeah, if you want to play a game of watching out for that, that's something to keep an eye out for. So coming into the stage 4 boss, Carabs. Very simple boss fight, like most of the other boss fights in this game, because we just blast them away with the arm cannon. Gonna start with 2 arm cannons and then start inside his hitbox, use the finger laser for another, like, circle of his health bar, and then just use 1 more arm cannon to finish him off. That's pretty much as quick as you can do it in RTA. In a TAS environment, you can finish him off, like, some frames faster, but it's really not substantially faster in a TAS environment. It's pretty much just getting rid of the damage boost, and the fact that you are not getting the damage boost requires a little bit of extra setup time in itself. It just happens to be some frames faster than not taking a damage boost. Than taking a damage boost, I should say. So, this is a screen that really exemplifies how nightmarish it can be to get random enemy locations. That these guys can just randomly be on the left or right, and yeah, as you can see, it wastes quite a bit of time if you don't get them, like, exactly on the right place. Fun fact, in the TAS, I manipulate them all so that they are all on the right-hand side. What a surprise. So they're just punch. Well, I end that by the very end of the screen, where once there's few enough enemies on screen that an arm cannon's going to finish them off, at that point, it's not really relevant whether they're on the left or the right. So now that laser is filled, we're going to start boosting the shot stat, even though I haven't used the shot at all in the run so far. Trust me, it is a very important stat. Not in the TAS. I will admit that in the TAS I don't boost shot, I instead boost punch because, you know, you hit things, so why not boost the firepower there? You simply don't need the utility that shot gives in a TAS, but in RTA play, it is pretty much necessary to get, you know, quote-unquote optimized runs. As much as this game can be optimized in RTA play because of all the random elements, but it certainly mitigates a lot of the RNG that can happen in the later part of the game. That was actually pretty fast. Alright, whatever. Not a huge thing. Those platforms are pretty difficult to work with since they're not... they try to follow you, but it's fairly loose and they do wobble around quite a lot, so it's more difficult to work with them than you'd think, and you do preferably want them to finish, again, as low as possible so that they exit the screen sooner. It's very slightly faster to not use an arm cannon on the next set of huge platforms that are going to come up. On that set that was just there, it's just flat out slower to use an arm cannon because you still have the other projectile-shaped enemies on the screen, so destroying the flying platforms faster doesn't actually speed anything up, so you may as well just not have the time loss of having the startup animation. These enemies, as you can see, you don't actually need to physically destroy them, you can just go close to them and they explode on their own. So these platforms, faster to finger laser. These ones, it is also faster to finger laser if you maintain constant damage on them and get them to finish on the bottom of the screen like that. It's very slightly faster to finger laser them rather than arm cannon them. And if you can't do it optimally like that, then it's faster to arm cannon them. So 2 arm cannons to get all 3 parts of this, and what are we getting? We're getting bad RNG. So there's a few different attacks this part of the train can use, and you know, they take different amounts of time to use. And ideally you get the attack which just stays out and lets you just arm cannon it to death before it goes back in, but not so lucky. So using a couple of kicks to cluster these enemies here, and then we can just punch combo them. Very nice. Got more than enough health that I don't need the health pickup that's hidden to the left there. And now I get this nice section where the foreground of the train doesn't let you see what you're doing, and you can't see which side of the screen the enemies are spawning on. This is the only part of the task where I actually turned off a foreground layer so that this was easier to work with, because it was like, since I don't have audio working frame by frame, I cannot deal with not being able to see what I'm doing. Like, I need to see where these enemies are spawning to make any progress here. And using this method of just arm cannoning across the screen, this is a purely RTA construct. Like, this is not something we do in the task, but it's by far the easiest and cleanest way to deal with these waves in RTA. Something that I haven't really mentioned with how I'm dealing with a lot of screen-wide enemy waves there as well is you can exploit the fact that the boost gives you intangibility, because obviously it lets you pass through enemies, but then once you become solid again, Astro and an enemy cannot occupy the same space, so if Astro becomes tangible again and is in the same place as an enemy, somebody has to move. And if Astro is closer to the border of the screen, it forces the enemy nearer to the center of the screen. So you can just boost past an enemy that's on a screen border and then turn around and get an instant screen-wide attack, which is really like consistent and easy to do. So we are now like 30,000 years in the past, don't question it. I mean, we've already been like on the moon, we've already been in Antarctica, so yeah, now we're in the past. Like I say, it's easier if you just don't question the storyline in this game. It's very confusing to keep track of. So that's what I mean there about I boosted past the enemy on the ground, and then it forced the enemy inwards because it couldn't shift it to the right because I was to the right of it. Gonna get some very small enemies here, which I'm actually gonna start with a kick. Okay, well, one of them started blocking, but still dealt with them easily enough. It's not perfect, but most of the enemy waves in this run are not going to be perfect. Oh, I really hope I can still kill this thing. Not quite. So this is something that is a little obnoxious about enemies in this game sometimes, that once they go off screen they simply don't take damage. You know, that's a pretty common thing in a lot of games, that if an object isn't off screen it's just not really considered to be loaded. So nice little bit of movement tech here. This is the only thing in this game which really remotely comes close to being a glitch, and I wouldn't even really call it a glitch, that if you like boost horizontally up a diagonal slope like that, the way that I see it is the game basically adds the horizontal momentum to the vertical momentum because it can't make you move to the right, so it simply forces you up faster instead. That's the way I see it, at least. Now this fight, tassing this fight was pretty interesting, since to beat this guy as fast as possible, you obviously want to, I'm going to play it safe. You want to maximize damage output, but if you get him down too low too quickly, it risks him using a special attack, which makes him completely invulnerable for like over 10 seconds, which is obviously completely, like, you can't have that in a task. The main way that we mitigate that in RTA is what I did just there, where you start the fight by going below him, which forces him to use a different special attack instead. But if you are observant there, you may note that it also causes the game to lag fairly heavily, which is also pretty unacceptable in a task. So I just had to go with not having that safety measure and still trying to go for a fast fight, which was very difficult to achieve. Like, it took me a fair bit of testing before I could get a fight there which was clean and he didn't use his time-wasting attack, because playing the fight in a certain way, it more or less forces him into a position where he's going to do that, and it's very difficult to get him to not do it. Now, I haven't been using the shot so far, but The shot is very useful, as I say, it's a screen-wide attack and it stuns enemies. And the more it's leveled up, the longer the stun duration is. This is a boss fight where as soon as you're finished dealing damage, he's supposed to become invisible and you need to go through a lengthy process to get invisible again. But instead we can use the shot to just force a stun lock and, yeah, deal with Denko very quickly. And this is going to be the same for the remaining boss fights of the game. There are 3 more boss fights in the run and they're all just going to be locked down by the shot. It's very relevant on this fight since Brontus is only vulnerable when the core comes out after he finishes an attack. It's not a guarantee if he's going to start letting you hit him very quickly. Nice, that was too high to him. Nice. So at this point I can more or less use 2 arm cannons per shot usage and the boss is going to be completely stun locked. So that's what I'm going to do here, just 2 arm cannons followed by a shot to refresh the stun duration, and Brontus is not going to get back into an invulnerable state here. As long as I'm at least 1 pixel off the floor, that will connect, so unfortunately I wasn't airborne when that attack went off, but it's whatever. 2 more boss fights. So we've got Epsilon, the aquatic robot, and then Pluto, the world's strongest robot. Epsilon is the only fight where I'm going to start with the shot rather than with the arm cannon, because there's a few different attacks Epsilon can use, and it's definitely in my interest to see which attack is coming up, because one of them is going to force me to play a little differently. Left arm, so he is using his own laser attack, which I'm going to need to maintain the stun lock for here, because once this attack starts up, he gains some invulnerability, and it kills you extremely quickly. So I need to use another shot there to maintain the stun lock so that this attack doesn't start up properly. Just not really any option but to play around that. So now I'm just going to put the last upgrade point into life. It's the fastest one to upgrade. And now we get into Pluto, the final boss of the run. It's going to be more of the same. Arm cannon to kill him as quickly as possible, and shot to stun where necessary. And time is going to be when Pluto's health bar reaches 0. A few different attacks Pluto can use. Some of them are fairly laggy, like this one is using. His plasma attack is even worse though, so I just want to hope that I don't use that. If it comes up, I'm actually going to use a shot to interrupt it. This missile volley is the best one because it has virtually no lag, so hopefully he's just going to keep doing this. Okay, another flame thing. This is, yeah, this is fine. This is going to be the end of the run in like 3 more supers. Time. And then you just speed through another screen, you get another upgrade point, you assign it, and then it's like, oh, you've saved the world, except kinda not really, because the world's been destroyed. Robot apocalypse conflict. What? Like I say, don't think about the plot of this game too hard. You'll have a much better time. Except if you really want to check the game out properly and follow the storyline, it's one of the highlights of this game in my opinion, but if you're just watching a run, it's like, you'll only hurt yourself trying to follow the storyline. It's not worth the effort. But thank you all very much for allowing me to feature this run. I really enjoy this run. I really like showing this game to an audience. Thanks once again to TAS Videos for accepting the task of this game for publication for the birth run. Very grateful to all of you. Very grateful to everyone for putting this event on. Just thank you guys very much. Continue to do work for a great cause, and thank you for letting me be on the show.